The Washington Commanders going 12-5 on the year, beating the Buccaneers in the wild card round, beating the Lions in the divisional round, and then losing in the NFC Championship to the Eagles. Their first conference title game appearance since 1991. In their first year with Dan Quinn as head coach and Jaden Daniels at quarterback, and they were the second worst team in the NFL last year, Dalton, at 4-13. So how on earth do the Commanders go from being the second worst team in the NFL to being one game away from making the Super Bowl?
Jaden Daniels. I mean, it's that simple. You go from having Sam Howell and Jacoby Brissett and whatever the mess that they've had, at quarterback for the last 5-6 years, and you suddenly get a quarterback who is fifth in overall grade this season, one of the most dynamic dual-threat players in the league already, and just an incredible transition he made from LSU to the NFL. It just felt like outside of the first game against Tampa, when Todd Bowles is notorious for beating rookies, it was just seamless. He was one of the 6 best quarterbacks in football this year. I think you have the big 4 of Allen, Burrow, Mahomes, Jackson. Justin Herbert was in that mix because he was spectacular too, but I don't think anybody else I would put above Daniels this season. I mean, he was just super low. I think the 3rd lowest turnover-worthy play rate in the league. Really the most dynamic runner in the league aside from Lamar Jackson. Accurate, manages the pocket well. He was everything. Even for as much as I had him QB1 before, when we were going through the draft process, you could never expect a kid to do this. And this is right after, you mentioned it earlier, we just got C.J. Stroud doing something like this last year. And Daniels found a way to top that. I mean, it just unreal performance from him and a really good rookie class in general. It was arguably my favorite rookie class going into it when we finished the draft. I talked about it. Mike Sainris still. Johnny Newton, it took some time to get over an injury, but he contributed down the stretch. Brendan Coleman was starting for him at left tackle. I just think you couldn't have drawn up for Dan Quinn and Adam Peters a better first year, especially with the way Daniels played, than they had this year. And making the NFC title game, honestly, it's just a cherry on top. They could have, even if they had lost to the Bucs in the wild card round, I would have been like, this is just an incredible year for Washington. And you look at the potential of what they can do with Daniels as the quarterback and all the resources they have to add to this team. They're going to be thinking they have a window here. Again, it's that rookie quarterback contract window where it's like, okay, we have resources to spend elsewhere. Do we want a Myles Garrett? Do we want a T. Higgins? Can we still have another draft class this good? How do we want to allocate all these assets? But man, oh man, I mean, you just couldn't be. If you're a Commanders fan, you couldn't be any happier with the way this year went, especially for the quarterback.
No, absolutely not. I mean, the fact that they made the playoffs at all is incredible. Then they beat the Buccaneers in the first round. That's really good. And you're like, okay, wow. Then you're like, okay, well, we're playing the Lions now. Then they beat the Lions in the divisional round. And then all of a sudden, yes, they get blown out in the conference championship game to the Eagles. But if you're a Commanders fan, it's like, dude, I don't care we lost by 32 in the conference title game. Obviously, you want to make the Super Bowl, but it's like, what an incredible year after being the second worst team in the NFL, after being so down in the dumps for a while, right? It hasn't just been like, oh, it was one bad year last year, now we're back. No, it's been a long time for the, like I said, last time they made the conference title game was 1991. It's been over 30 years since the Commanders made the conference title game, because of Jaden Daniels and because of how good Dan Quinn was, building the culture there in Washington. New ownership. I think I really understated new ownership in Washington. That's huge, right? Because they had maybe the worst ownership in all of sports with Dan Snyder at the helm. Immediately you see, a new culture is in Washington right now with the new ownership and obviously adding a great head coach in Dan Quinn and a phenom at quarterback in Jaden Daniels. 90.6 PFF grade, 5th best in the NFL as only a rookie. The 2nd highest graded rookie season we've ever seen in PFF history, which dates back all the way to 2006. Only Russell Wilson in 2012 had a higher PFF grade than Jaden Daniels as a rookie. Also, Commanders, big part of Jaden Daniels as well, the rushing grade, a 7th best rushing grade in the NFL. Kind of a good trio they had in the backfield between Brian Robinson Jr., Jeremy McNichols, and Austin Eckler. The ageless wonder, Bobby Wagner, 3rd highest graded linebacker in the NFL at 34 years old. And really, yes, he was amazing on the field. He was a veteran presence they needed in that locker room. So much newness in that organization. To have a guy like Bobby Wagner, who's obviously worked with Dan Quinn before back in Seattle, to have him there is just like, okay, we can learn from this guy. We could follow this guy. He could be our leader. That was huge for, I think, Washington as well. So having that kind of veteran presence, Bobby Wagner, was massive. Dalton, in terms of what went wrong, I mean, it's incredible they got this far with how flawed their team was this year. Second lowest graded defense in the NFL. Only the Panthers had a lower defensive grade than the Commanders. Third worst coverage grade. Fourth worst run defense grade. The seventh lowest graded offensive line in the league. And not much of wide receiver outside of Terry McLaurin. So really, what this was Jaden Daniels being that freaking amazing that they made this magical run with overall a roster that still needs a lot of work.
Yeah, they need a ton of work, and that's when you have the quarterback, it can change everything, and this is the perfect example of it. Yeah, they're an incredibly flawed team. Did they make plays in the right moments when they needed to? I think about the Lions game with the turnovers, absolutely, but they still gave up 31 points in that game. Eventually, they were going to lose because you can't win every shootout like that. You got to make stops eventually. But no, I think the fun part of this team, they just won 12 games with a rookie quarterback. You mentioned it, a team with a whole lot of flaws, but a lot of resources to fill those gaps in. Wait till they get somebody to help McLaurin at wide receiver. Wait till they get, an offensive line that's not kind of full of just Band-Aid guys, right? You talk about like guys like Andrew Wiley, and it really hurts them that Sam Cosmi tore his ACL in the Detroit game, and he might miss part of next year. That because he's really their best offensive lineman. Wait till they get a legitimate pass rush. Wait till they actually fill it out at corner, after the previous regime whiffed on the Emmanuel Forbes pick, and then the Marshawn Lattimore trade. Obviously, you get what they're trying to do. They're trying to fill a spot, but hamstring injuries just wasn't great. And I don't know that he'll be back next year because I think they can save all $18 million on his contract next year by cutting him. So no, there's several positions on this team that they need to reset, but they've got the resources to do it. And again, when you have a quarterback like this that can get you this far basically on his own, boy, you start to reimagine the ceiling because this is nowhere near this team's ceiling.
No.
And they made the NFC title.
They're ahead of schedule by a lot right now.
They're way ahead of schedule. So, I mean, you talk about what went wrong, and this is the type of team where I go, maybe not even necessarily wrong. It's just, okay, you fill in these gaps, and we might be talking about you hoisting a trophy at some point soon.
Yeah, the Commanders, in terms of those assets I mentioned before, offseason assets, between your draft picks, restructure potential, and effective cap space, 11th in assets. That's easily the best of any playoff team that we have this year. You see third in effective cap space, about $69 million they have to play with this offseason. Notable free agents, Bobby Wagner, Dante Fowler Jr., Jeremy Chin, Zach Ertz, Diami Brown, Olamide Zaccheaus, Noah Igbenogany. They need to upgrade this defense everywhere, but especially edge and corner. And you see that right there, that number, $69 million. With the recent news of Myles Garrett requesting a trade and wanting to go to a contender, I think this is absolutely one of the top teams they can go to.
Well, and they can create more room if they need to. Like I said, they can shed all of Lattimore's $18 million salary, so you could add 18 more to that $69 million number. Jonathan Allen might be in for at least a restructure or some sort of renegotiation here. I look at Andrew Wiley, not exactly what you necessarily want at right tackle if you want to keep him around, but you could ditch him and save most of the $10 million that he's charging next year. I mean, you could end up with a situation where they're close to $100 million in cap space. I mean, you want
for a team that just made the NFC title game.
You want a crazy scenario. Find a way, you get rid of Lattimore at 18, you could end up with Garrett and Higgins. You got enough room for it. What if you did it? What if you just went full nuclear and said, you know what, now's the time, and you went Myles Garrett and T. Higgins, and you add it, and then you just have to figure out a reasonable enough offensive line to get us through on that side of the ball. But I don't think anything is out of question here when it comes to improving this team. They have a ton of assets to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things they should do, bring back Bobby Wagner. We project him to make about $5 million a year. That is a steal for what he is as both a leader and as a top linebacker still in the NFL. They have to bring back Bobby Wagner. Add more at wide receiver. In fact, the only two wide receivers they have under contract heading into next year, Terry McLaurin and Luke McCaffrey. That's it. So there is room to just completely revamp this receiving core around them. Add a potential starting tackle as well. I think that's another spot that could really improve on the offensive line. They have all the assets to do it. One of the league's most exciting quarterbacks. But like I said, this is still a flawed team that really just needs to build around it. But, man, they made an incredible run this year with that flawed of a team. And it's going to be really exciting times to be a Washington Commanders fan right now after not having a very exciting time to be a Washington Commanders fan I'm sure for most Commanders fans in their entire life. Now it's like, okay, wow, we might have something going here with what we got. And Jaden Daniels, the new ownership group as one of our conference points as well, coming from the Golden State Warriors, who obviously know a lot about building a great championship contender year in and year out. So Devin Smith pointing that out really well. So yeah, it's really impressive what Washington did this year, but there still is a lot they need to work on in order to get over that hump and really become a team that can win the Super Bowl as well.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure you like and subscribe the video. And if you don't have a PFF Plus subscription, you can get one to see all the premium stats that we talked about here on the show, plus the expert betting and fantasy advice over at subscribe.pff.com. The description is also right below, so if you are not a PFF Plus subscriber, you can come one today.